Bonjour mon petit chifflet, Amber here, and we're about halfway through November and I'm finally taking time to sit down and film my October reading wrap up. To be fair, November is NaNoWriMo month, so for a lot of that time I was at least pretending to write a book. So whatever, I'm doing it now. Last month, I actually read a lot. I took part in the Hocus Pocus readathon, and then I just continued just reading for the month, which is shocking. So, y'all ready for this? In the month of October, I read a total of 11 books. 11. Technically 11. And I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so like I said, I took part in the Hocus Pocus readathon last month, which was a lot of fun. I love Hocus Pocus. So that's where the bulk of my reading happened. I read 7 physical books, 2 books on my Kindle, an audiobook. Was it 3 books on the Kindle? Oh, 2 audiobooks. So I read 7 physical books, 2 ebooks, and 2 audiobooks. Okay, so I'm going to start with the book that I technically DNF'd, but I'm still counting it as a book that I finished because I am certainly done with it. And that was It by Stephen King. I listened to that for the Hocus Pocus readathon. That was to complete the task of read a book that frightens you. And I was already listening to it. I don't know when I started. I've been listening to that book for ages. And I really wasn't. I discovered in October that Stephen King books just really aren't for me. I've said this several times now that I like Stephen King movie adaptations, but the books I could live without. This happened before when I listened to, or I tried to read Misery 3 times and then I ended up finishing it on audiobook, but the movie itself is one of my favorites of all time. Anyway, so for the Hocus Pocus readathon, I was desperately trying to finish, especially because at the time the second movie had just come out or was about to come out or whatever. And I did intend to see it. I still haven't seen it, but at the time I intended to go see it. And I couldn't do it. I devoted 11 hours of my life that I can never ever get back to that book. The audiobook is like 40 hours long. Like I said, about 11 hours, and I still don't think I encountered that clown one time. There was a weird scene with a bird. I barely retained anything that happened except for the obscene amount of slurs used. Stephen King, what? That was the moment I was like, alright, I'm not getting anywhere with this, so we're moving on. I still counted it towards my Goodreads goal because 11 hours is a whole book. So let's move on to some quality content. The first book that I completed for the Hocus Pocus readathon was the best book that I've read this month. Top books of the year. I'm completely obsessed. Also, before I keep going, I want to apologize now because I know that me trying to review these books is going to be kind of scatterbrained and just me struggling to remember what happened in all of these books because I consumed a lot in a very small amount of time, and also it's been almost a month since I read some of these. Some of these it's been a month since. Anyway, the first book that I completed, like I was saying, completed the task of read a book with a witchy main character. For that book, I read Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron, and y'all, wow. I knew going into this that I was going to love it, but definitely top books. Maybe like top 3 books that I read this year. So, if you don't know, Kingdom of Souls we follow our main character, Ara, who comes from a long line of witch doctors and like practitioners of magic in her world. She, however, doesn't have magic, and throughout the story we follow her going to extreme lengths to obtain magic when children in the kingdom start disappearing, and she goes to extreme lengths such as like trading years of her life to obtain magic to find the person who's stealing children, and continuing the sacrifice to stop this person. And then the book takes such a wild turn that I loved this book so much. I already said that going into it, I just knew that I was going to. First of all, this cover is absolutely everything. I know a lot of the promotional blurbs, I guess, compared this a lot to Children of Blood and Bone, and I do get that because we are in an African inspired world. There are the Orishas involved. The main character is on this quest to stop a villain, I guess, but at the same time there's a whole different situation. The twists in this book are, book 2 is going to be so wild, and I'm not ready. I mean, I'm ready and I'm mad that I have to wait for book 2, but also my spirit is not ready to be ripped out of my body again, you know? Great. Easily top books of the year. I know I keep saying that. Then I went on to read the group book for my team. I was on Team Sanderson Sisters for this readathon, and we had two choices for the group book: Serpent and Dove, which I had read the previous month, and this book, which was Hocus Pocus and the all-new sequel, which is by A.W. Jantha. I had to order this book because I had already read Serpent and Dove and loved it. So this is, as the title states, Hocus Pocus. The first half of this book is a novelization of the movie, and then the second half picks up 25 years later back in Salem, and we're following Poppy, who is the daughter of Max and, I almost said Emily, and honestly that's illegal. The daughter of Max and Allison. Basically it takes place on Halloween night, I guess, essentially, where Poppy and her two friends get caught up in some Halloween hijinks, bring back the Sanderson sisters, and have to go on a quest to destroy them again. Okay, I never actually intended on picking this book up. If I ever bought it, it was simply to sit on a bookshelf because I love Hocus Pocus, and that's it. I could have gone the entirety of my life without this book. Honestly, Danny and Binks don't deserve this. That being said, the first half of the book was absolutely fine. It was a breeze to get through because, like I said, it's a novelization of the movie. Like, it's literally, the movie was snatched from the screen and pasted on to the pages of the book. A lot of the dialogue is lifted directly from the movie. Great. But the second half, first and foremost, I feel like it was trying too hard in several departments. One, we get it. It's set in 2018. We got it. A lot of my issue, like I mentioned in my reading vlog, is similar to my issues that I had with when I was reading Emergency Contact, with the excessive modern lingo or just the language in the book is just a lot. The constant witch puns. Please. There were some bits that I don't like that the way the first half ended was a complete addition to this, a story that is already established and solely put in the book to fit the narrative of the second book. There's a whole new character added that I didn't think was necessary. There were a lot of plot holes in the second book, a lot of moments that you think are going to come back up or get resolved and they don't. Like, there was a whole scene where Mary Sanderson has this whole like musical number for God knows what reason. I don't know. This one is extremely nitpicky, honestly. Issue is that we do have moments with Thackeray Banks and Emily Banks, who are ghosts. I mean, yeah, they were ghosts in the first one too. Where Poppy refers to Thackeray as Banks. Duh. He's referred to Banks in the first one because he's a cat. But then she'll like Banks and Emily, and that's just so nitpicky because her last name is also Banks. And like at this point, he's not a cat anymore. We can call him Thackeray. The parts where we get the original characters, they're adults now. They didn't feel like Danny felt like Danny, but like Max and what's it, Max and Emily again? Max and Allison just felt like your typical adults. We had the annoying go-to stereotypes of every high school movie in existence, and I don't know. I know I'm not necessarily the demographic of this book, but I feel like Hocus Pocus is such a nostalgic thing that I didn't think it needed to be touched, and now I'm like really nervous that they're actually actively talking about a Hocus Pocus sequel. I'm really good on that. So then I went on to another book. This book has been getting a lot of talk this year, and I read this to complete the task or meet the task of read a book with a female protagonist, and that was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I really do like this cover. Okay, so this book is set on this island where in Massachusetts, I believe, where we are at this all-girls like boarding school that has been quarantined because the whole island has been quarantined because there's this like epidemic that leaves the girls with all types of like, the girls and the island honestly, with these deformities. The government basically doesn't know what to do with them, and this follows our main character. What is her name? Hetty, where she, you know, we follow her in her life in the school, and then her best friend gets taken, and this is basically her and the other part of their little trifecta risking it all basically to go find her. I was really underwhelmed by this book. It's described as a feminist retelling or gender retelling of Lord of the Flies, or gender flipped Lord of the Flies. I haven't read that book, but every dystopian I've ever read is basically compared to that book. There was a time in my life where I was really into dystopian books, and this isn't this. I had high hopes for this. I wanted to love it so much, but I just felt like it never actually went anywhere. It felt like the characters were very flat. I see it also marketed as having LGBT representation or queer representation, which I can't necessarily say isn't there, but it also just feels underdeveloped and flat. Basically, the character, it just didn't do it for me. I didn't care about any of these characters. I know they're not necessarily supposed to be likable, but I just didn't care. I wasn't invested in their story. I didn't understand. And the way it ended, wow. Before reading the book, watching reviews of it, a lot of people talked about how disappointed they were with the ending. I'm like, how bad could it be? But that's how bad it could be. The cover's really nice. Rory Power actually just announced or shared the cover of her new book that's coming out. I probably will still read it. One, it has another really nice cover. There's corn. I love corn. And this was a debut novel, so I'm curious to see how her writing has grown. Next, to complete the task of read a book that is spellbindingly atmospheric, I picked up a book I've been meaning to read for so long. It's just been sitting on my shelf, and I've met the author of this book a couple of times. But I finally did it, and it was Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova, which is the first book in the Brujas of Brooklyn series. Brooklyn Brujas. So, in this book we follow Alex, who is a Bruja, but she hates magic. She doesn't seem to have any magic and is tired basically of her family, her mother and her sisters, trying to bring her powers forward. So at the start of the book we are approaching her death day, which is kind of like a quinceañera, where it's like her coming of age celebration, coming into her brujadom. It's basically where they summon their ancestors to acquire their blessing, the blessings of the ancestors, and I guess heighten their powers. But at her death day ceremony, she doesn't necessarily do that, and instead enacts a spell that she thinks is ridding herself of her powers, but instead her entire family disappears. So then she is left to team up with what is his name? Nova, who is a brujo that she's basically just met, can't trust, but seems to know what to do to reverse the spell or get her family back. And so she has to team up with him, and they travel to Los Lagos, which is where their souls have been taken. It's this like enchanted other world, basically. Does that make sense? And it's their journey through the labyrinth, essentially, Los Lagos, to get her family back. And along the way she has to defeat the devourer, whose intent is to steal all the power of the people who she has trapped in Los Lagos. And then I think her plan is to come into our world and wreak havoc and be all powerful and all that jazz. This was a very fun, quick, easy read. I flew through it. I enjoyed my time in Los Lagos, or on Los Lagos. Is it an island? Whatever. It was very fun. There was a lot of adventure. I enjoyed it. That's all there really is to say. There were some bits that I am neither here nor there about. The romance is whatever. It's complicated, but I think I'm trying not to give anything away. Some of that could have been fleshed out a little more. It just felt like, here, this is also a thing, but I'm not going to complain about it. This is just some books are just fun to read, you know. And I do obviously intend to continue the series. The next book is Brujaborn, which is Alex's sister's story. Great. So, so the last book that I finished for the Hocus Pocus readathon, y'all, is a book that is so popular on Bookworld, and it's taken me so long to step into this world. This is another book I've had for a while. I think I got it from Book Outlet a long time ago because I wanted to understand the hype. And it's Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. And this one I read for the challenge of read a book with a powerful villain, obviously the Darkling. I'm gonna be really honest with you. Two things. I only ever intended to read this series, the Grisha trilogy, because I want to read the Six of Crows duology, and I know it's set in the same world. You don't necessarily have to read these first, but I kind of wanted to understand how the world worked prior to going into that series, so I always intended to read this first. But I only really committed to reading it now because the cast, as we know, for the Grisha show that Netflix is doing was announced recently, and Ben Barnes is playing the Darkling, and I've been in love with Ben Barnes since he was Prince Caspian, and that man ages like fine wine. Like, every time I see him, he just gets better looking, and honestly, that alone puts me on Team Darkling. I'm not saying I'm on Team Darkling because I read the book, but anywho, if you are late to the party like me and don't know, in this book, and we follow Alina in this book, say in this book one more time. Follow Alina, who is has grown up an orphan with her best friend Mal, in this world where people, the Grisha, have forms of magic. She has joined like the royal army or something like that, and then plot twist, finds out she has magic and is a Grisha, and is whisked off to the Darkling's home under his protection, and she finds out that Loki's been lying to her, and he's been telling her that he wants to expand or go into the Fold, which is like this place in the border of two parts of the country where it's like these creatures or whatever live and destroy people. I'm not good at describing this book. But he wants to use the Fold as a weapon and take full control, whatever. He's a bad guy. Anyway, so I read this book. I went into this book not with very high expectations, because this is one, from what I've gathered, this is one that you either love or you hate. I didn't really do either. I don't love it, I don't hate it the way I thought I might. It's a standard 2012 YA book. Alina is boring and bland. The Darkling is the Darkling. Their relationship is weird. I don't hate Mal the way everyone else seems to. We'll see what happens. I have the other two books now. I'm low-key invested just because I'm gonna watch the show, so now I need to know what's going on, you know? I need to know how this turns out. There are so many times, and there's one main time in this book I'm like, wow, Alina, you're an actual idiot. Wow. But yeah, I read it. I don't hate it. Great. I actually gave it like a 3.5 stars, which is almost 4 stars. So I get the hype, and I'll definitely get it when Ben Barnes is all like, "Fine, make me your villain." I'm like, ah. So that was what I read for the Hocus Pocus readathon. So for the remainder of October, I almost said Halloween, but you know, same thing. The first book I completed was an ebook, and it was actually the Stalking Jack the Ripper novella, which is Becoming the Dark Prince by Carrie Maniscalco, which is basically the final like chapter or two of escaping from Houdini, told through Thomas's point of view. There's not much to say about that. I just really love Thomas Cresswell, and it was cool to be in his head for a little bit. Also, there's a scene like at the end, and I'm just like, oh. But I love Thomas. That's my baby. That's that. So then, keeping with the like dark, spooky theme of the month, obviously I moved on to The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is the Owlcrate edition. This book, so in this book we follow two characters. We follow Ren, who lives in this small village on the edge of the forest. She is a gravedigger. Her family are gravediggers. Since like her mother's died and her dad has gone missing, leaving her and her two younger siblings to fend for themselves basically. They are struggling and they're on the brink of like being evicted from their home. And also in her village, corpses rise. The corpses, which are known as bone houses, rise, and she's one of the only people, she is the only person that kills them. And we also follow Ellis, who is a map maker from like the kingdom. I think he was taken in by the king when he was found as a child, and he's currently mapping his way through. He found to like the mountain expanse. He finds himself kind of lost on the edge of Ren's village. She finds him, saves him from a bone house. That's not really a spoiler. They're forced to team up to basically break the curse that has the dead rising. Now, I liked the book. I liked this book. I liked Ellis a lot. I like that Ellis is like, he's like such a cute soft boy, and where Ren is like the tough one. So it's kind of like that trope that flipped. I just felt like something was missing with the book that would then have me love it. Sometimes I don't know, sometimes it almost felt like sort of like a middle grade. Also, something that really irritated me reading this book is I don't know what either of these characters look like. I don't know if it's intentional that we didn't really get any descriptions. Eventually I figured out that Ren, I think she's a redhead. Usually, you get your descriptions of what, if someone's looking at someone, if you're reading like a first person point of view, right? Well, whatever point of view. If you're reading a book, and this is third person, reading a book and you're like following somebody and they look at someone, and at some point you're going to describe what they look like, right? I don't know what these characters look like, and I think that also took me out of the story because I couldn't really attach or have a good picture of either of them in my head. I did like the sort of like Welsh folklore mythology that was heavy in this book. I liked the setting of the book a lot. I liked the setting, but I felt like the plot was lacking a little bit. Next, we have another audiobook, and that one was one of the free audiobooks provided on Audible. I chose Camp Red Moon, which is like a collection of short, like spooky middle grade stories, but it's edited by R.L. Stine. I think one of the stories is also by R.L. Stine, and honestly, I'm not going to turn up free R.L. Stine. I just felt really nostalgic. I was obsessed with Goosebumps growing up, which makes a lot of sense as the person that I am today. So I'm like, yeah, cool. And it was a middle grade collection, but it was really cute and it was really fun, and I did enjoy most of the stories. So that's that on that. So the next, we have another book I read on my Kindle, and that one is like one of the only ones that's kind of strayed from the theme that I had rolling this month, and I picked up a romance book. If you've been watching for a while, you will have seen where I read a couple months ago Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey, which was like my first like tiptoe into this realm, and I really loved the book. In fact, I finished reading it, the physical book, and then I listened to it on Audible, which was an experience. This time around I read Getaway Girl by Tessa Bailey, and this book follows, what is her name? Where? Addison. How could I forget that? Anyway, Addison and Elijah. Addison has recently moved back to town after like living in New York for a bunch of years. To her, she's sort of a pariah of sorts, whereas I think her mother is blamed for coming between, I think her mother slept with her cousin's fiance and then like was kind of shunned basically. So she's coming back to town dealing with that, because like in this small town, takes place in, I think, South Carolina. In this small town, they hold on to grudges and blame children for things their parents have done. And at the start of the story, she's kind of crashing her cousin, the daughter of that cousin's wedding, to Elijah. That's the first time she sees him. Elijah is left at the altar, and basically she gives him a ride and escape from all of the bless your hearts, you can do betters, and they become friends. And then more than that, oh, also he's running for mayor. Elijah is running for mayor, which becomes a conflict because then he has to like hide his friendship with her, to I guess protect her from the press, but also protect his candidacy from the very conservative town that he lives in. I really like Tessa Bailey's books, and I like reading these books is really making me start like really enjoy reading contemporary romance novels and give it more of a chance than I have in the past. And I really enjoyed this book. It was steamy, it was spicy, it was really spicy. I like the characters. We don't have someone calling someone baby girl every 3 seconds. Travis. I am now trying to figure out, I do want to read another Tessa Bailey book. I have one downloaded, but I haven't really heard anyone talk about it, so I'm gonna read it. But I'm trying to figure out what, if you read these type of books, leave me some suggestions down below. I have a few, I'm making a list. I have a few that I want to check out that by other authors, but yeah, let me know. I'm tiptoeing. And finally, whew, goodness, the final book that I read in the month of October completed a series. I am finally done reading this series, and I read Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the final book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Okay, briefly, I'm not gonna summarize this book because we are like, what, 4 books in, and I don't want to give any spoilers. So Stalking Jack the Ripper is the story of Audrey Rose, who lives in like Victorian England, and all she wants to do is be like a forensic scientist and cut open dead bodies. She is an apprentice to her uncle, who is a forensic scientist, and this story is set during the Jack the Ripper murders. And she, along with her uncle's other apprentice, Thomas Cresswell, who I've already stated that I absolutely adore, team up, are on the case to solve the murders. And the next book takes them to Romania. The next book takes them on a cruise to America. And in this book, we are in New York City for the most of the book. And this is the conclusion of everything that's been building up thus far. And honestly, I think this was a very solid conclusion to this series. Thomas, I can't say this enough, owns my heart. I've heard people complain that this book focuses too much on like the romance aspect of the story as opposed to the crimes, but like at this point I don't really care that much. I'm here for a good time, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I also really like the fact that along the way Audrey Rose acquires an injury and now lives with like chronic pain, and I really like the way that it was handled in the book, that it wasn't one that when it was acquired, it wasn't just like a throwaway thing that happened and then like, okay, we're over it now in this new book. She has to actually live with it, and we see her dealing with the challenges that this injury presents, but it doesn't stop her from doing what she needs to get done. Also, there's a bit that I yelled about a lot in the vlog where Carrie kind of pops off at the misogyny in Christianity. I'm just gonna say that was a page that, wow. If you didn't see the vlog, I might put the clip of me freaking out here. But yeah, I gave this like a 5 out of 5 stars, especially considering sometimes I just rate books based on how I feel about them. I don't need like to think critically about it. And the fact that, one, I've had such an up and down roller coaster relationship with this series. I had to restart it to actually get into it. The first time I read the first book, I was like, no. no, I get it, but no thanks. And then I restarted it and I actually got into it, and I've become attached to these characters, and to see the way their stories played out, I just really enjoyed it. So it's between this book and Hunting Prince Dracula for my favorites still. I always think that one would be my favorite. Oh Lord, I'm tired. But those are all of the books that I read in October. Goodness, now it makes sense as to why I've been reading. We're on the 15th and I think I've only read 2 books. I'm tired. Thank you for watching. If you've made it through this, you are the MVP. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like me, feel free to subscribe. Let me know what your favorite read of October was and what your favorite read so far of November is. All my places are down here so you can follow me, and I'll follow you back and we can be buds. And I'll see you very soon. Bye.